Hey, I'm Chris. After a decade of teaching SolidWorks to design students, I've learned that mastering sketching early unlocks everything else. Parts, assemblies, drawings, you name it. In this video, we're starting right from the beginning. I'll show you how to start a sketch, use the line tool effectively, and pick up some helpful selection tips. We'll also cover different rectangle methods, and I'll share some practical advice along the way to help you sketch faster and cleaner. Let's get into it. These lessons you're about to see are taken from my full SolidWorks for Designers course on Udemy, where I go deeper into the tools and provide project files to follow along. If you want to learn faster with additional content, practice files, and support, check out the full Udemy course linked below. Okay, time to get into sketching essentials. Now here in sketching essentials, it's all about mastering some of the basics. We're going to master the basic sketch tools. We're going to refine designs using modification tools. And we're going to apply geometric constraints and relations to fully define and control the sketches. And we're going to focus on the tools required for the CSWA exam. Now, we've been over those previously, but I'm just going to remind you here. The sketch tools mentioned specifically in the CSWA exam are sketch entities such as lines, rectangles, circles, arcs, ellipses, and center lines, and the sketch tools as offset, convert, and trim. Now, those tools on their own are probably, let's say, 30 to 40% of the available sketch tools in SolidWorks. So there are a lot more advanced tools out there and a lot more advanced methods, but for the CSWA and for Foundation SolidWorks, covering off those sketch tools, and included with that sketch relations, that's going to give you a really great and strong foundation, okay, for building your parts and fully defining your sketches. I'm going to talk about fully defined many types. Let's get into it. So I want you to start with a part. So a new part file. Now, as we start to talk about some of the tools in SolidWorks, so with sketches and later in the next section 3, features, creating solid bodies, I want you to remember this, that there are multiple ways in SolidWorks of doing the same thing. So I will do my best to explain what I think is the best, most efficient way and guide you to best practices. However, there are definitely other tutorials, other learning sites out there, and in time, you will develop your own workflow, your own methods to create what it is that you want to create. I'm coming from a design engineering background, so everything I do sort of has that little tint to it. The way a mechanical engineer considers and sets up their sketches might be different to what I do here. So keep that in mind. I will show you the best, the most obvious, and the simplest ways of doing things. But yeah, there are multiple ways. So if you find another way to achieve what we achieve on screen, that's totally fine. Before we can actually do our sketch, the first thing that you need to know is where you can do your sketch. And when you start a new file, as we've done here, there's only 3 places that you can create a sketch. And that is the front, top, and right plane. Sketches always need, and we're talking about here 2D sketches, 2D sketches always need a flat plane or face to sketch on. Now we will look at sketching on faces and surfaces later in the course. When you're starting a new file, your first sketch always has to be on a plane. Now, with design intent in mind, depending on what sort of object you're trying to create, sometimes it will make a difference whether you're sketching on the front, the right, or the top. And the reason for that is once you've done that sketch, you're going to use that sketch to create your geometry. Now, if you would, let's say you're designing something like a water bottle, okay? It's a round shape. Now, for a round shape, we're probably doing a revolve body. A revolve body is one that goes from a center line and revolves 360 degrees around. So when you do your sketch, you probably don't want to do your sketch on the top plane, because when you do that and you revolve it, your bottle is going to be lying down, okay, on the round edge, round face. If you're designing a bottle, you probably want to design the bottle standing straight up. Example, here, if I was doing this sketch, okay, then what I'm doing is sketching this side shape to the bottom, and there would be a line that goes straight up the middle. That would be my construction line and center line. And it would revolve like this when it's in 3D. I don't want to sketch it like this on the side, because then in all my drawings, all my part models, everything, facing the wrong way. So must start with a plane whenever you're starting a new file. Now I'm going to show you I'll show you here how to show and hide your planes, because that can be easy for beginners as well. Make things easier to understand which plane it is you're sketching on and your orientation as you move around the interface. So to show your planes, you click on a plane and you can click this little show or hide icon. Let me just zoom in for a second. Okay, so you see this icon here, show hide. Now, it may be that your features here, your planes, are showing, but you still can't see them. And that might be because of this setting here. So in the middle of the screen, you have this I button, which is for show all types. And you can click that on and off, and that's actually going to hide everything except for your bodies. Okay, so if they're showing here, but you can't see them on screen, just check this I button. Make sure that's disabled, so all types are visible. You can also click that arrow drop down to click on planes, and that's just going to hide all of your planes at once as well. Right, so you need to make sure those are visible if you're having trouble seeing that. Okay. Now, how to move around your viewport. Okay, so in section 1, we've already talked about navigating around. So rotating around our planes in our space and how to look normal too. Now, when we start a sketch, we're going to use that tool to make it easier to see exactly what we're sketching, because in the example I'm just going to show you now, the incorrect way of doing things, if I start a sketch on the right plane, but I'm viewed like this to the side, or when I sketch things like circles and rectangles, it's very hard to get the proportions and size right and actually see a lot of the detail. So particularly as a beginner, you want to be viewing your sketches normal too. So what we will do now is we're going to hide the top and the right plane. So we've just got the front plane viewing. We've just got the front plane shown, and we're going to start a sketch on the front plane and use some of the basic tools and just play around and experiment. So to start a sketch, again, there's multiple ways of doing it. I'll show you a couple right now. The easiest way is to select the plane or the face that you want to sketch on and go to this little pop-up window here, sketch, left click on that, and that will start a sketch. Now you notice SolidWorks automatically took me to a normal 2 view. So it moved me automatically to that viewport there. Or it moved automatically my camera to be viewing normal to the plane that I'm sketching on. And I'm in an edit sketch mode, and I can see that because my sketch tab here on the command manager is active. I have an exit sketch button in the top left and in the right of the screen with a cross, and also an accept sketch button here on the right. So now with those tools active, let's go through our main tools one by one to understand how they work. Line tool. Now, when you go over these tools as well, and you hover over them, as I explained before, it gives you a description, and it shows you, in some cases, a little animation about how they work. Also, it will give you a hotkey that you can use. In this case, the letter L. Now, I'm starting a line for reference, and we'll talk about this much more later. Start your line on this red dot in the middle, which is your origin. Now, to draw a line, you click once with your mouse. You can let go of that mouse button and drag out your mouse. And then when you're ready to create that line, you click again. Now, when you're doing a line segment, that segment of line, that's going to continue until you escape, cancel, or double click. So what I would like you to do is just draw more shapes. Now, you'll see as we're doing this, SolidWorks is doing 2 things. It's automatically adding relations. Relations are the green squares, and we will talk about those later. It's also creating this sort of construction line. All right. So you see that dotted line? That's not actually a line. It's just giving me a preview about where my line is going to go. Now, sometimes that preview might, in fact, line up with an existing line. So you can see in this example, it's a bit faint on screen, but you can see the yellow dotted line, and you can see the yellow square that's next to my cursor, those 2 lines running through it. That is a parallel relation. And you can see the line that's nearby which is highlighted in orange, that is what I would be parallel to. So if I drop this line here by clicking the mouse button, you can see it's added the parallel relations between those two lines. What that's actually done is made those two lines parallel. And we'll talk more about relations shortly. All right, I'm going to finish my sketch by going back to the very first point of the origin. Now, whenever you draw a sketch, and here I'm just doing a new shape, and you come back to the start point, that will automatically end that sketch segment. The other two ways to end a sketch segment that I'd like you to know is by double clicking, okay? And then the other method is to press the escape key. Now, they do two different things. If you double click, it will end the line segment, but you can keep going and start a new segment. I can show you by doing this example here. Double click, I can start a new line. But when I hit the escape key, it actually exits out of the current tool that I'm using, which is the line tool, and goes back to the normal cursor tool. So there's a couple of ways of sketching a line. We'll talk a lot more about relations in the next lecture, but I want to point out here that what these relations are, if you can see them, is this one is a vertical relation, which means this line that I've drawn is always going to be vertical. This one is horizontal, meaning this line is always going to be horizontal. And then there's other relations like this one here, which means these two lines are perpendicular, which means the angle between them is always going to be 90 degrees. You can delete and remove relations, and you can add them manually. But SolidWorks has the ability built in to automatically add relations when it thinks it knows what you're trying to achieve. And it's very handy to use that to your advantage to be more efficient as you're going through the process of creating your sketches. Okay, now here I'm going to show you a very neat trick for selecting your lines. So let's say all of these sketches here that I've got, I actually want to delete many of them. Let's say I want to delete some of the lines that I've sketched. The easiest way to do that is to select a line by left clicking and then hitting delete on the keyboard. That will delete the line. If you have multiple lines that you want to select, you hold down the control key on the keyboard and select the next line, and it will add that to the selection. And you can see that on the left of screen under selected entities, it's got line 23 and line 25. And if I hit delete, it's going to remove them. SolidWorks, like many Windows software, has an undo function. So if I press Control Z, that will undo those previous steps. There is also up on the menu here, buttons that you can press, undo and redo. The simple advice is never rely on undo and redo. Always save regularly, and if you need to, save versions, save multiple versions of your parts. But back to the selection tool. So let's say I want to delete, and for this I'm just going to hide my planes for a second. Let's say I want to delete all three of these lines here. Well, another quick way to select them is to draw a box. And you can draw a box in two ways, funnily enough. If you click and you drag from the top left to the bottom right, it will create a blue box. That blue box will select everything inside the box, and then you can delete. Now, if I draw that box and it's only capturing that third line on the right, that is the only one that's going to be selected. Okay, so interesting little tip there. If you want to select everything that you touch, the way to do that is draw a box from the bottom right to the top left. Very quick. All right, so next, let's play around with some rectangles. So we have under the rectangle toolbar, under sketch, there are 5 types of rectangles: corner rectangle, center rectangle, 3-point corner, 3-point center, and parallelogram. I should mention there are also 2 other line types up here in the menu, but I can honestly say I've never ever used those second 2 line types from the menu. I will show you how to create them later on. But the rectangles I use regularly. Now, we're just going to zoom across the side, and we're going to start with the corner rectangle. So how a corner rectangle works is you click once, that makes your first corner, and then you click again, and that adds your second corner. And then you can start another sketch and another sketch, and you're creating more and more rectangles. Okay, that is a corner rectangle. Here I'm going to sketch all 5 types of rectangles. The next type is a center rectangle, how that works is it drops a center point and you drag out and you go up and across, and that is creating a rectangle from the center. The difference between these two rectangles is this one at the bottom has two construction lines running through the middle diagonally and a sketch point in the middle of those two. Now, why would you have two different rectangle types? Well, here's where you need to think about design intent. So if you're creating some sort of geometry which is going to be symmetrical, right? Let's say we are sketching a screen of some sort. Inside, let's say this is like a remote control, and we have a little screen that sits in the middle. Now, if we try and do that screen with what is a normal corner rectangle, and then we want to have it perfectly in the middle, well, we have to add some dimensions to both sides to make it symmetrical, okay? But if we get one that's got a center point, so a corner rectangle like this, a center rectangle like this with a center point, we can use that center point to act as a relation, okay? Which means as we change the shape of our remote, it gets bigger or smaller, or this screen gets bigger or smaller, it's always going to stay symmetrical, and it's less effort to do so. It's a very small difference, 1 or 2 clicks between creating a corner rectangle or a center rectangle. However, we'll talk a lot about our skills compounding and our time efficiency and savings compounding. If you can do something in 1 click compared to 2, think how much time you're going to save over years and years of working in the software. It's the way I like to think about it. All right. So back to our rectangles. Sorry for deleting them. We have a corner rectangle. We have a center rectangle. Next, a 3-point corner rectangle. These kind of rectangles are useful when you need to draw a rectangle which isn't horizontal or vertical, but still is going to remain a rectangle. Because if I was just to draw this shape with a line tool, I would have to do so and ensure that I perfectly got these relations, these perpendicular relations to at least 3 corners, so it would always remain a rectangle. Okay, now there is a center point, a 3-point center rectangle as well. This is one that starts from the center and then drags out on an angle. And then the last one is a parallelogram. You can see how that works. So a parallelogram is basically like 4 line segments, but each line on the sides and the top and bottom, they've got parallel relationships. So everything that we see here, all these rectangles, they can all be created using the normal sketch line tool. So I can recreate each of these just using a line. So the one at the top here, I'm going to do 4 lines, okay? The next one, I can do 4 lines. I can then do a line that's going through the middle, and I will show you how to turn that to for construction. We'll talk about construction lines soon. I can put a sketch point in the middle. All right, I've just created that. I've created this one already with lines. This one, you can see it'll be a copy of this, but at an angle. And again, like the parallelogram, I can draw, say, a line here, and then that parallel. Okay, is a parallelogram. All right, so you can use the normal line tool to create all of these shapes. However, using the rectangle tool is going to be much quicker and much more efficient. So we encourage you to experiment, play around with that tool. Okay, we'll leave these sketches here because we'll come back and do some more work with those shortly. I'm going to press my show all type to show that front plane again. I just want you to be aware that as you rotate around your view, if you do zoom in and zoom out, or if you lose your sketch or anything like that, to get back to your sketch, press the F key on your keyboard, or you can use the keys here to go to view, and you can go zoom to fit, which is the F key, and it's going to bring it back. And if you go normal 2, it's going to make it flat on the screen. Thanks for watching part 1 of the Sketching Essentials series. If that helped you get a better grip on SolidWorks, hit the like button and let me know in the comments. Next up, we'll explore more shapes and tools to keep your sketches clean and under control. See you there.